The parking bay outside the glass-walled Tokyo corporate tower was supposed to be quiet at 6:40 a.m., but the silence cracked the moment Rebecca Langley stepped out of the revolving door and barked, "Why is he the one driving me today? Don't we have standards?" Her voice hit the air like a slap, sharp enough that two interns froze mid-step. She stared at the black driver standing beside the executive sedan, tall, composed, dressed in a clean charcoal suit instead of the uniform she expected, and the confusion on her face twisted into disdain. It should have ended there. But the man didn't look away. He didn't shrink. He simply opened the car door with a calm, deliberate motion, too calm for a man being insulted by his own employer. And that was the moment, the exact breath before everything changed, when something in her gut flickered with a warning she ignored. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Malik. Rebecca's heels clicked across the pavement like impatient punctuation as she approached the car, muttering under her breath about professionalism, about appearances, about drivers who look like they belong in street pickups, not billion-dollar negotiations. Malik heard every word, not because she was loud, but because she wanted him to hear. He kept his posture steady, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes level. No flinch, no shift, no apology carved into his stance. That bothered her more than anything. "Get the door properly," she snapped, even though he already had. She didn't step inside. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and expensive, her smile a thin blade. "Next time they assign me a driver, I want someone who actually reflects the company. Someone polished, presentable, and who speaks English without, Her eyes flicked over him again, slow and dismissive. An accent. Malik tilted his head by a fraction, not defiant, not submissive, just steady. Waiting. Rebecca scoffed like he had confirmed a bias she'd been rehearsing in her head. "God," she muttered. "This trip is too important for incompetence." Her voice dropped, sharper. "Just don't say anything. Don't confuse the clients. This deal is sensitive, and they don't need distractions." She didn't mean distractions. She meant him. The man who had arrived early. The man whose suit was pressed. The man she'd never bothered to learn the name of, even though his profile had crossed her desk twice this week. He held the door again as she finally slid into the back seat, but not before she hissed. "And try not to get lost. This isn't your neighborhood." A passing employee, junior analyst, 22, carrying a stack of binders, stuttered mid-step at the words. She looked at Malik, then at Rebecca, confusion hardening into something heavier. A question, unspoken but alive. Why is she talking to him like that? Rebecca noticed the glance and shot the girl a look that sent her scurrying inside. Malik closed the door with a quiet click and circled to the driver's seat. The air in the car felt different, thicker, charged. He didn't turn the engine on right away. He just rested his hands on the wheel, letting the silence sit, letting her words settle without sinking into him. He'd been here before. 18 years old. First job at a courier service, where a receptionist told him packages only went out with real staff. 22. First interview in a tailored shirt he saved 6 months to afford, when the hiring manager said the position had been filled after seeing his face. 31. Speaking flawless Parisian French to a client, only to have the client ask if he'd learned the phrases for fun. And now, 40, with 9 languages behind him, for international certifications, and a mind sharp enough to negotiate circles around most executives, he was being treated like he didn't belong in the driver's seat of a car he maintained better than she managed half her department. He pressed the ignition. The hum of the engine filled the cabin like a low growl. Rebecca tapped at her tablet aggressively. "We need to be in Shinjuku by 7:30. Do you even know the back entrances? The translation team will meet us separately. You won't be needed for anything other than driving, so don't insert yourself." Insert himself. As if he hadn't already saved this company twice from multi-million-dollar embarrassments by correcting mistranslations during negotiations he wasn't even supposed to be in. But she didn't know that. She'd never read his file. Not once. She only saw the label in her mind. Driver. Black driver. Replaceable. Beneath her, Malik shifted gears and pulled onto the road, the city sliding past the windows in quiet silver streaks. 30 miles away, in a penthouse office, A board member's message sat unread on Rebecca's phone. Asterisk, new protocols. Malik attends all deal meetings moving forward. Critical asset. Do not sideline. Asterisk, a warning she hadn't seen. A truth she hadn't considered. A reality she'd soon choke on. For now, she sat straight-backed and certain, believing she'd already measured the worth of the man in the front seat. Believing he was beneath her. Believing she understood power. And Malik, calm, steady, unreadable, drove them toward the single moment that would flip her entire world on its head. The ride to Shinjuku should have been silent, but it was the kind of silence that felt like a held breath, stiff and brittle, the kind that cracked under the smallest pressure. Rebecca sat in the back seat with her tablet propped on her knees, jabbing at the screen with the impatience of someone who believed the world moved too slowly for her brilliance. Malik drove with the same steady composure he had held since the insult outside the tower, but inside his chest there was a tightening, not anger, not fear, but a recognition he had felt more times in his life than he cared to count. He glanced at the rearview mirror for only half a second, long enough to see Rebecca roll her eyes as she listened to a voice note from a board member. She rewound it and scoffed as if the voice in the recording had insulted her. She had no idea that same board member had sent her a message that morning with Malik's name highlighted twice. She had no idea what she was walking into. And Malik did not say a word. He kept his focus forward, letting the city slide by in glass reflections and neon glints. Then her phone buzzed again. A message preview lit across her screen, and even from the front seat he saw her squint at the name. Kazuo Watanabe, President, Junsei Holdings. Her face paled. She tapped the message open. Reminder, interpreter shortage confirmed. No on-site translator until 10 o'clock. Please ensure no miscommunication occurs before signing. This deal cannot afford errors. Malik saw her jaw clench. The irony was almost too sharp to ignore. She shoved the phone down and snapped. Just get us there without being late. And do not speak. Not even a greeting. Malik blinked once, slowly. She was walking herself closer to the edge, and she still did not see it. As they approached the district, the streets shifted from glass to steel to the high-gloss veneer of corporate power. Junsei Holdings occupied the tallest building on the block, its front lined with security and dark-suited staff. Rebecca checked her reflection, smoothing her hair and fixing the cuffs of her blazer. Remember, she said, leaning forward as if giving instruction to someone simple-minded. You drop me off, circle the block, and stay out of sight. I do not need anyone mistaking you for a negotiator or assistant or anything more than what you are. She paused in smug satisfaction. Malik did not answer. The car eased to a stop in front of the entrance. Two Japanese executives stepped out to greet Rebecca. She pasted on a smile so wide it nearly cracked. She opened her door to step out, but before she could take a full step forward, one of the executives approached the car window and bowed politely. Good morning, he said, voice warm. Your translator is here. We were told to expect him. Rebecca blinked. Translator? There is no translator. Mine was delayed. The executive looked confused. No, he is here. Then he turned to Malik and bowed again. Carter-san, welcome back. Rebecca froze with one heel on the pavement and one in the car. Her heartbeat stuttered. I am sorry, she said, laughing nervously. There must be a mistake. But there was no mistake. Malik stepped out of the driver's seat, adjusting his jacket with a quiet ease that looked far too natural for someone she believed was beneath her. The second executive stepped forward. It is an honor to see you again. Your assistance last quarter prevented a major loss on our Osaka Holdings project. We are pleased Junsei can work with you again. Rebecca's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The world did not spin. It slammed. Hard. She looked between Malik and the executives as if trying to reconstruct reality from scattered pieces. You know him? She asked, her voice a thin, fragile wire. Know him? The executive repeated with a gentle laugh. Carter-san speaks our language better than most domestic interpreters. He saved 3 companies from major legal conflicts. He even corrected the contract drafts last year when a separate firm attempted to shift liability onto Junsei. Without him, the deal would have collapsed. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Malik as if seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, the unwavering posture, the composed breathing, the quiet in his eyes that she mistook for subservience. She swallowed. Hard. You speak Japanese? She whispered. Malik bowed slightly, his voice calm and precise. Yes. And 8 others, depending on the setting. The executives both nodded with admiration. Please, one of them said, gesturing toward the elevator. We will begin the pre-negotiation briefing. We have been waiting for Carter-san to arrive. And then, for the first time since stepping out of her tower, Rebecca felt something she had not felt in years. Panic. She stepped toward Malik, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you not say anything earlier? Malik looked at her evenly, not with anger, not with triumph, but with a quiet truth that cut deeper than any retaliation. You told me not to speak. The sentence hung in the air like a verdict. She tried to recover. I did not mean, you meant exactly what you said. He replied, steady, unflinching. The executives waited politely nearby, giving them respectful distance, but fully aware of what they were witnessing. Malik adjusted the cuffs of his suit, ready to walk inside. Rebecca reached for his arm without thinking, her voice cracking. Malik, this deal is worth $1 billion. He nodded once. Calm. Controlled. Yes. And I am the only person here who can save it. She stared at him, her ego unraveling thread by thread. And for the first time in her career, she realized how small power looks when it is built on arrogance rather than respect. The elevator ride to the 38th floor felt nothing like the drive through Tokyo. In the car, Rebecca had believed she controlled the air. In this rising steel box, she could not control her own breathing. The executives flanked Malik with respectful distance, their hands folded, their voices lowered, their attention focused entirely on him. Rebecca stood slightly behind, as though she had been physically pushed out of the center of gravity. When the elevator doors opened, a wave of warm lighting and minimalist decor washed over them. The pre-negotiation floor of Junsei Holdings was built like a museum. Polished stone, sound-absorbing walls, and a silence that felt designed to make every word matter. Malik stepped forward with calm assurance, and the executives guided him toward a long mahogany table already set with documents, tea, and a digital contract interface. Rebecca trailed behind by several steps, the tap of her heels suddenly too loud for the room. A junior analyst in a crisp navy suit approached with a tablet and bowed deeply to Malik. We prepared the draft summaries as you requested, he said. Malik nodded once, effortlessly shifting into fluent Japanese, thanking him graciously. Rebecca froze mid-step. It was one thing to hear him speak a sentence outside. It was another to hear him glide through full professional dialogue, tone perfect, vocabulary precise. She had heard many interpreters in her career. None sounded like this. Her stomach tightened. Malik accepted a folder from the analyst and began scanning it while the executives waited for his cue. Not Rebecca's. His. She tried to step closer, but one of the executives gently motioned her to a seat near the far end of the table. Not beside Malik. Not even across from him. The message was quiet but unmistakable. She was not the authority in the room. The meeting began with Junsei's deputy director presenting an overview of the deal. Malik stood beside the holoscreen, translating in real time with flawless clarity. There was no lag, no hesitation, no searching for the correct phrasing. He spoke as though he were the one who wrote the documents. Rebecca sat stiffly, her tablet untouched. She wanted to speak, to contribute, to assert control, but she could not. She did not know the language. She did not know the cultural cues. She did not even know what half the reference regulations meant. And she understood, painfully, that every assumption she had made about Malik had been built on ignorance disguised as authority. She tried to interject once, lifting her hand slightly, but Malik continued speaking, unbroken. She dropped her hand. Her cheeks warmed. One of the executives turned toward her with a polite smile that held no malice but carried truth. This part does not require you. Malik pointed to a specific clause on the holoscreen, and his voice sharpened slightly as he explained, switching to English long enough for Rebecca to understand. This section was altered. The phrasing shifts liability for environmental compliance onto your corporation. That was not in the prior version. If you sign this as it is, you are accepting full responsibility for any regulatory fallout. Rebecca's eyes widened. That cannot be right. My legal team said everything was the same. Malik tapped the screen again, highlighting a small phrasing change. Someone on their side attempted to slip this in, likely hoping the translator shortage would force you to rely on the English summary. This single clause could cost your corporation $300 million over the next decade. The room buzzed with tension. The Junsei executives exchanged stunned looks. The deputy director whispered, "This is exactly why we asked for him. Last time a similar clause appeared, Carter-san caught it before it became a disaster." Rebecca's throat tightened. Malik saved her deal before she even walked into the room. The executives bowed to him in gratitude. He returned the gesture with calm confidence. She had no idea what to do with that. As the meeting continued, Malik exposed 2 more errors in the drafted contract, one minor and one severe. Each time he did, Rebecca felt the weight of her earlier insults pressing harder against her ribs. By the time the final documents were distributed for signature review, the Junsei team appeared not only reassured but impressed. Deeply impressed. They shifted their seating positions without thinking, angling themselves naturally toward Malik whenever a question arose. A cultural advisor, who had been silent until now, leaned forward and said in accented English, "Carter-san, you have an intuitive grasp of nuance. It is rare for non-native speakers to differentiate between what is written and what is implied. You understand both." Malik bowed slightly again. "Respect for the language means respect for the people." The advisor smiled, clearly moved. And Rebecca, without meaning to, exhaled a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Because something inside the sentence was meant for her too, even if he had not directed it at her. Respect for the language means respect for the people. She had respected neither. When the final signatures were added digitally, the deputy director stood and extended both hands toward Malik in gratitude, a significant gesture in formal Japanese business culture. Malik accepted it with grace. Then, unexpectedly, the director turned to Rebecca. "President Watanabe would like to speak with you privately." Her heart lurched. The executives guided her toward a side room with textured walls and a single low table. She entered, trying to steady her breathing. Watanabe, a man in his 60s with silver glasses and a posture carved from years of leadership, stood waiting. He bowed lightly. She scrambled to return the gesture. He motioned for her to sit. She did. He took a moment before speaking. "Your driver," he said, adjusting his glasses delicately, "is extraordinary." Rebecca nodded stiffly. "Yes, I see that now." Watanabe watched her carefully. "It concerns me," he continued slowly, "that someone of such skill and value might be overlooked by the people he works with." Rebecca's breath stilled. Not because he raised his voice. He did not even frown. But every word felt like a polished mirror being held in front of her. "Misjudgment," he said gently, "is not the failure. The failure is refusing to see clearly once the truth is shown." She felt heat rising to her face. "Sir, I understand." She swallowed. "I was wrong." Watanabe nodded once with measured approval. "Many leaders never admit that. You may yet become the leader you think you are." She felt the sting in the kindness. The meeting ended with a polite bow, but as she walked back toward the negotiation floor, her steps were smaller, quieter, as though she feared disturbing the air that Malik had restored. When she returned, she found him standing near the windows, the city sprawling behind him in fractured reflections. She approached, her voice almost unrecognizable in its softness. "Malik, thank you." He did not turn fully, but he acknowledged her with a slight nod. "You are welcome." She stood beside him for a moment, uncertain of what to say next. The room buzzed with quiet celebration. The deal was saved. Her reputation, however, was not. And standing next to the man she had underestimated, she finally understood something she had never considered. Power did not come from position. It came from the truth someone carried long before anyone else noticed. The celebration on the negotiation floor had not yet faded when the next shift in the room's energy began. Executives moved in quiet clusters, exchanging bows and soft congratulations. But beneath that polished courtesy there was something else, something like awe directed toward Malik, who stood near the panoramic windows reviewing the final digital documents. Rebecca tried to mimic their composed professionalism, but her posture betrayed the tension coiled beneath her blazer. Her fingertips tapped the edge of her tablet, not from impatience this time, but from the unsteady weight of realization. She had walked into this building believing she commanded the room. Instead, she had discovered she was the least prepared person in it. Malik finished reviewing the contract and handed the tablet to a Junsei analyst with a polite nod. The analyst bowed deeply, thanking him again for the accuracy that had saved the company from a near-catastrophic liability. This time, another executive approached Rebecca. It was the cultural advisor who had earlier praised Malik's mastery of nuance. He spoke gently, but the careful respect in his tone heightened her unease. "There is one final courtesy President Watanabe wishes to extend," he said. "A tour of our compliance archive. He believes it may be instructive." Rebecca hesitated, unsure whether this was honor, warning, or both. She agreed, her voice steadying only because she forced it to. The advisor motioned to Malik as well. "Carter-san, your insight will be valuable." Malik nodded and stepped forward, his presence grounded and unshaken. As they walked to the archive wing, the corridor lights shifted subtly, illuminating the path in soft gradients. The silence between Malik and Rebecca grew heavier with each step, although he walked with calm neutrality. She walked with the echo of her earlier words replaying against the walls of her mind. When they reached the archive room, a glass door slid open to reveal a long chamber lined with digital files, holographic summaries, and legal case studies sorted by decade. President Watanabe was already there. He turned when they entered, his expression thoughtful. "Rebecca," he said softly, "I want you to see something." He gestured to a central console. Malik stepped back slightly, allowing her forward, but Watanabe shook his head. "Both of you." The console flickered to life, displaying a case file from several years earlier. As the data scrolled upward, the story unfolded. An American corporation had nearly destroyed a joint venture due to a mistranslation in regulatory language. The board had no translator available, and the company had been one signature away from financial collapse until a junior cultural liaison stepped forward and corrected the misunderstanding. Rebecca frowned at the structure of the file. "Why are you showing us this?" Watanabe's gaze drifted toward Malik. "Because he was the liaison." Rebecca turned sharply. "You saved that deal too?" Malik did not respond. Watanabe answered for him. He did more than save it. He negotiated the correction himself. He was not even credited publicly, but those who were there remember exactly who prevented a billion-dollar failure. Rebecca felt her heartbeat in her throat. Watanabe continued. "Your corporation was warned this morning that he must attend the negotiation. We notified your board last week, but your director said you insisted you did not need assistance." Her breath tightened. I was not aware of that." "That is the concern," Watanabe replied gently. "Leadership is not measured by how loudly one speaks. It is measured by whom one listens to." His eyes shifted to Malik with respect. "You have someone exceptional working for you. It would be a tragedy to continue underestimating him." Rebecca opened her mouth, but no justification came. Instead, a flicker of memory pulsed through her mind. Her own first year as a manager, when her mentor told her, "Ignore the quiet ones. They rarely hold value." She had believed him too deeply, and now the cost of that belief stood beside her, dignified, patient, and far more capable than she had ever realized. Watanabe stepped away to take a call, leaving the two of them standing in the center of the archive. Rebecca spoke first, her voice lower than before. "Malik, I owe you more than an apology." Malik did not move. "You do not owe me anything," he said calmly. "Respect is a choice, not a debt." She felt the sting, not because he intended to wound her, but because it was true. She stepped closer, her tone uneven. "I made assumptions, unfair ones, and I do not know how to undo that." Malik finally met her eyes. "You do not undo it. You change what you do next." The words landed with the weight of truth. She nodded slowly, her throat tightening as she tried to steady her breath. A Junsei assistant entered the archive and bowed. "Carter-san, the board has requested your presence for the signing confirmation." He bowed again. "And they asked specifically for you to bring your senior partner." Rebecca's head jerked up. "Senior partner?" Malik remained silent, but the assistant continued. "Yes. You. They assume you are the executive in charge of the negotiation because Carter-san led the discussion." Rebecca's face flushed. Her ego fractured. She was not even recognized as the lead of her own deal. But Malik saved her. Again, she inhaled slowly. "Then let us finish this," she said, steadying herself. They walked back toward the negotiation floor, the hum of conversation drifting through the hall. When they stepped inside, The entire Junsei team stood in unified respect. For Malik, not for her. As he moved toward the table, Rebecca followed at his side, but not out of entitlement this time. Out of acknowledgement. Out of understanding. Out of the first quiet step toward becoming the leader President Watanabe believed she could still be. And as Malik prepared the final documentation, the truth crystallized around her like a mirror she could no longer avoid. The most powerful person in the room had never needed a title. He had only needed to be seen. The signing confirmation began like a quiet storm, subtle in sound, but heavy with consequence. And as Malik stepped toward the center of the negotiation floor, every executive shifted instinctively to make space for him. The Junsei team arranged the final documents on the table, the air thick with reverence that had not existed when Rebecca first walked into the building. She followed a few steps behind him, no longer drifting with misplaced confidence, but moving with the sober awareness of someone who had finally seen her reflection for what it truly was. The deputy director handed Malik a stylus with both hands, bowing lower than before, and Malik accepted it with the quiet dignity that seemed to radiate from him naturally. Rebecca watched the exchange with an ache she could not articulate, a realization rising through her like a slow burn. She had treated him as if his silence meant inferiority, when in truth, his silence had been strength, strategy, and restraint, the kind she had never mastered. As Malik reviewed the last column of amendments, the room's attention tightened around him like a gravitational pull. Every breath felt calibrated to his pace, every movement reactive to his expression. One small shift in his posture, one quiet nod of approval, and the entire table visibly exhaled. Watanabe re-entered the room just in time to witness it, his hands folding behind his back as he approached. He spoke in Japanese first, acknowledging Malik's precision, and then switched to English for Rebecca's sake. "This agreement is stable because of him," he said gently. "$1 billion is a number, but trust is the infrastructure beneath it." Rebecca tried to respond, but when she opened her mouth, the words came out softer than she intended. "I understand that now." Watanabe nodded once, then looked to Malik. "Shall we proceed to signatures?" Malik tapped the final approval on the digital display. The contract flashed green. The Junsei team applauded quietly, the kind of applause reserved not for ceremony, but for deep relief. Rebecca stepped forward to sign her section, but when she placed her hand on the surface, the tablet chimed with an error. The system displayed a simple message: authorization not verified. Her cheeks flushed. The deputy director adjusted his glasses and attempted to check the device, but the system refused her access again. Watanabe raised an eyebrow, mildly puzzled. "Strange," he murmured. Malik stepped forward, scanning the projected interface. After a brief moment, he spoke, calm as always. Her clearance did not update with the new protocol. Because the legal team instructed only one primary representative be granted full signing authority today. Rebecca's heart dropped. The primary representative? The deputy director looked from the tablet to Malik and bowed deeply. "Carter-san was assigned as your corporation's primary," he confirmed. "We received that directive directly from your board." The room froze for a full second before the shock rippled outward. Rebecca's pulse crashed in her ears. Her board had replaced her as the signing authority, and they had not told her. They had sent Malik instead. The humiliation clawed at her ribs, but beneath that humiliation was something far more painful: understanding. They trusted him more than they trusted her, and she had given them every reason to. Malik read the devastation on her face, but his eyes did not hold triumph. Only truth. "I can authorize you," he said quietly, his voice softer than she had heard at any point in her career. "If that is what you want." She swallowed, the sound thick in her throat. "Yes," she whispered. "Please." He pressed a sequence of commands on the interface. A soft chime signaled that her authority had been granted. She signed, her stylus trembling against the glass. When Malik added his signature beneath hers, the system pulsed gold, signaling the deal had been executed. The room erupted in polite applause, but Rebecca barely heard it. Her eyes were locked on Malik's name printed beside hers, equal in size, equal in weight, equal in authority. She had never realized how powerful it felt to stand beside someone you had underestimated, and how humbling it was to know they had carried your success long before you noticed. As the executives moved to prepare the closing statements, Watanabe approached them one final time. He addressed Malik first. "You have our highest respect. Your integrity carried this negotiation." Malik bowed. Then Watanabe turned to Rebecca, his expression gentle but unyielding. "Do not let this moment become shame," he said. "Let it become change." Her breath wavered. She nodded. The Junsei executives led Malik toward the media room where the ceremonial signing photo would be taken. Rebecca followed, but not out of entitlement. Out of necessity. Out of the realization that the success the world would soon applaud had never belonged to her alone. When the cameras flashed, Malik stood in the center. The advisors and directors positioned themselves instinctively around him. Rebecca stood beside him, not because she belonged at the center, but because for the first time, she understood her place was not about position, but about perspective. And as she looked at Malik standing before the cameras with quiet strength, she finally understood the truth she had ignored for far too long. The man she thought was beneath her had been the one holding her company above water the entire time. The ceremony lights dimmed slowly as the final camera flashed, but the shift in the room's temperature was immediate and unmistakable. Admiration flowed toward Malik like a current, quiet but undeniable, while Rebecca felt herself drifting to the outer edges of relevance, a place she had never stood before and never imagined she would. The Junsei media team escorted their executives toward a small reception area meant for post-signing statements. And although they invited both Malik and Rebecca, it was clear from the instinctive positioning of every person in the room that Malik was the anchor holding the moment steady. He did not bask in it. He simply existed within it with the kind of grounded poise that made others straighten their spines without understanding why. As they entered the reception suite, an expanse of glass walls opened onto the Tokyo skyline, the city buzzing below in a wash of neon in motion. A soft chime sounded as the doors shut behind them, sealing the room with a hush of anticipation. Junsei's communications director stepped forward and bowed to Malik. "Carter-san, we would like you to lead the statement. Your insight is what protected this partnership." Rebecca felt the gentle sting of those words, but she said nothing. She knew she had no rightful claim to lead. Malik nodded and moved toward the podium. She followed a few steps behind, an observer now, not the centerpiece. As Malik prepared his remarks, the room adjusted around him like orbiting planets finding their proper alignment. Executives, cultural advisors, legal consultants, everyone stood a little straighter, a little more attentive. He thanked them in flawless Japanese before shifting into English for the international broadcast. His voice carried not with volume, but with clarity, each word shaped with respect. Success in global collaboration is not built on assumptions, but on understanding. When we honor each other's language, we honor each other's humanity. That is how partnerships endure. The silence that followed was reverent. Cameras clicked in soft bursts. The communications director bowed again. When it was Rebecca's turn to speak, she approached the podium with a weight in her chest she had never felt in her career. Humility was a muscle she had not trained, and it trembled under her. She began cautiously. "I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work of my colleague, Malik Carter, whose expertise ensured today's agreement honored both sides with precision and integrity." She paused, the spotlight heavier than expected. Leadership is not about being the loudest voice. It is about listening to the right one. "I am grateful I had the chance to listen today." The room absorbed her words without judgment, but the truth echoed back at her through the quiet stillness in Malik's posture. When the statements concluded, the executives invited them to a private tea ceremony to honor the successful deal. It was a gesture of deep cultural respect, one typically reserved only for those who had earned trust at the highest level. As they walked toward the ceremonial suite, Rebecca drifted closer to Malik, her voice low so others would not hear. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "All of it." Malik did not slow his pace. "Intentions matter less than action," he replied evenly. She nodded. "Then I will act differently." He gave a brief nod, not approving, not dismissing, simply acknowledging the words as they were. Inside the tea room, the atmosphere softened into warm wood, muted light, and the calming scent of matcha. A tea master in traditional attire performed the ceremonial preparation with deliberate movements, each gesture a reflection of centuries of discipline. Malik was invited to sit at the place of honor. Rebecca was placed beside him, not as a symbol of authority, but of restored balance. As the ceremony progressed, Watanabe spoke quietly across the low table. Carter-san, your understanding of nuance and responsibility honors our company. Then he turned to Rebecca, his tone gentle. And your willingness to see what you did not see before honors your future. The words settled into her like slow, steady truth. After the ceremony, as they stepped into the hallway leading back to the main elevators, a Junsei analyst rushed toward them, breathless with urgency. Carter-san, we just received communication from your board. They have called an emergency briefing in 20 minutes. They want both of you on the call. Rebecca stiffened. An emergency board meeting could mean anything, but combined with the fact that they had reassigned signing authority without telling her, the possibilities rattled through her mind like loose stones. Malik thanked the analyst and turned toward the elevators. Rebecca followed, her voice thin. They did not inform me about changing authorization. It means they made a decision they believed protected the company, Malik finished calmly. Not a personal attack. A strategic adjustment. She swallowed hard. But now they want us both. Yes, he replied. Which means something larger is happening. The elevator doors slid open. They stepped inside. For the first time, Rebecca noticed her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked smaller, quieter, less armored. Malik stood beside her, composed as ever, the person she should have recognized as an asset long before this day proved it. When the doors closed and the elevator began its descent, the hum of the machinery filled the air between them, charged with the undeniable truth that the next 20 minutes would shift more than a deal. They would shift power. They would shift perception. They would shift the future of her entire career. And as the elevator fell steadily toward the ground floor, for the first time since sunrise, Rebecca was not afraid of Malik's silence. She was afraid of what that silence had always revealed about her. In the ride back down the elevator, the seconds felt stretched. Thin, as if time itself was bracing for what waited on the other end of the call. Rebecca stood with her hands clasped tightly in front of her, shoulders tense, breathing shallow. Beside her, Malik remained steady, grounded, the same calm center he had been in every storm that morning. When the doors slid open to the lobby, a soft echo of footsteps and muted conversations greeted them, but the world outside felt distant, muffled by the weight of the board's sudden summons. An emergency briefing meant only one thing. The board had been watching everything. Word traveled fast in corporations, but results traveled faster. And it was impossible to ignore how the negotiation had unfolded, impossible to overlook who had carried the deal, impossible to pretend the person they had entrusted with authority had not justified every ounce of confidence they had placed in him. They found a private conference suite near the lobby, a glass-walled room overlooking the street below. The assistant had already prepared the video call. The display pulsed with soft light, waiting for authorization. The moment they stepped inside, the door sealed behind them automatically, and the hum of the city faded. Rebecca hesitated before approaching the console. They did not even warn me, she whispered, but her tone was not angry anymore. It was unguarded, almost raw. Malik studied the screen for a moment. You will not know everything before it happens, he said calmly. Leadership is not about preventing difficulty. It is about responding to it. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. You make it sound simple. It is not simple, he replied. It is intentional. The console chimed. The board was ready. Rebecca inhaled sharply and pressed to join the meeting. 12 faces filled the screen, executives seated in high-backed leather chairs around a long table 3 oceans away. The expressions varied: neutral curiosity, focused professionalism, one or two with unreadable sharpness. But every gaze shifted instantly to Malik. Not her. Him. The chairman leaned forward. Mr. Carter. Ms. Langley. We will keep this brief. Rebecca nodded, but the chairman's attention did not return to her. We have received preliminary reports regarding the Junsei negotiation, he continued. We also received confirmation directly from President Watanabe about who preserved the deal. Malik remained still, offering no expression beyond composed attentiveness. The chairman continued. This morning, we authorized Mr. Carter as the primary representative for signing, based on the recommendation of our compliance and strategy departments. Rebecca swallowed hard, the memory of the error message flashing across her tablet burning behind her eyes. We did not disclose that change to you. Another board member added, her tone firm but controlled. Because this deal had no margin for error. Mr. Carter's track record with international partners is exceptional. The chairman interlaced his fingers. But now we must address the larger matter at hand. A tension rippled through the air. The chairman exhaled slowly. Ms. Langley, we have concerns. Rebecca's pulse stumbled. Concerns, she repeated softly. Yes, the chairman said. We have reviewed multiple internal reports regarding your leadership conduct, including your handling of cultural liaisons and multicultural team members. There appears to be a consistent pattern of dismissal and underutilization. Every word struck with precision. Furthermore, added the board's legal advisor, we were informed you instructed staff to limit non-essential personnel today, disregarding our directive that Mr. Carter attend. Rebecca flinched. I did not know. The advisor raised a hand. That is the problem. Silence expanded like a widening crack in glass. And then the chairman shifted his attention fully to Malik. Mr. Carter, your contributions today were beyond exceptional. You not only interpreted the negotiation, you prevented a multi-million-dollar liability and preserved a partnership the company has spent years cultivating. Malik inclined his head politely, humility woven into every movement. The chairman continued. We are restructuring our international strategy division. We would like you to serve as director of global negotiations effective immediately. Rebecca stared at the screen as if the air had been punched from her lungs. Director, a role that oversaw every multinational deal. A role she had once aimed for. A role she had believed she deserved. Malik responded with the same measured dignity he had shown all day. I appreciate the confidence, he said. But I will only accept if conditions ensure that no one is sidelined or misrepresented again. Today's success required cooperation, not hierarchy. The board exchanged glances. The chairman nodded slowly. Your terms are acceptable. The motion passed unanimously. The screen displayed the final confirmation. Rebecca forced her breath steady, her voice low. Congratulations, she managed. He turned to her, the smallest shift of empathy in his eyes. Thank you. The chairman spoke once more. Ms. Langley. Her spine stiffened. Yes, sir. We are not removing you, he said, and she exhaled shakily. But we are placing you under leadership review. You will report directly to Mr. Carter for the next quarter. He will have final say on all international negotiations. It felt like a verdict delivered with velvet gloves. Embarrassment and relief collided inside her in trembling waves. She nodded. I understand. The chairman gave one last look at Malik. Lead us well. The call ended. The room fell silent again, the world outside suddenly louder than before. Rebecca let out a long, unsteady breath. Director, she said softly, almost to herself. Malik glanced at her. It is just a title. No, she whispered, voice breaking just slightly. Today proved it is a responsibility. The two stood in the glass-walled room, the Tokyo skyline blazing behind them, the day's weight settling like a final page before the chapter turned. And for the first time since morning, Rebecca did not fear the next step. She only feared repeating the version of herself that had walked into the day believing she understood power. Because now she knew exactly where it had always been standing. The room remained still long after the board's faces disappeared from the screen. The silence was neither hostile nor comforting, just heavy with the weight of consequences settling into place. Rebecca stood near the glass wall with her hands resting lightly against the cool surface, her reflection fragmented by the city lights, each shard showing a version of herself she no longer recognized. Behind her, Malik reviewed a summary sent by the board's strategy division, his posture calm, measured, and unwavering in the way it had been from the moment she met him that morning. The difference now was that she finally understood the strength behind that calm. You will be my supervisor, she said quietly, the words tasting unfamiliar but honest. Malik turned toward her. I will be your colleague, he corrected gently. Director or not, the work still depends on collaboration. Rebecca nodded, though the knot in her chest did not ease. I did not just misjudge you, she said. I misjudged what leadership even is. Malik studied her for a moment. Awareness is the first step, he said. What you choose after this matters more than what brought you here. She let out a long exhale, the kind that drains pride more than air. I want to do better, she said. Not because the board is watching, but because today showed me who I do not want to be anymore. For the first time since the morning began, his expression softened. Then you will. An assistant knocked lightly and peeked into the room. "Forgive the interruption," she said, bowing to both. "Junsei's transportation service is preparing cars to take you to the press briefing downtown. They asked which of you will be giving the official company statement to the international journalists." The question lingered with delicate intention. Rebecca glanced at Malik. She knew the answer. "He will," she said, her voice steady. "Director Carter will represent us." Malik inclined his head, but there was no triumph in his eyes. Only acknowledgement. The assistant bowed again and disappeared down the hall. As they walked toward the lobby doors, the staff reacted instinctively to Malik's presence, offering respectful nods and slight bows. Rebecca noticed the difference between admiration earned and authority assumed. She had lived too long in the second category. Outside, the evening breeze rolled through the plaza, carrying the scent of street food and the distant hum of traffic. Junsei's black sedan waited by the curb, a driver holding the door open. Rebecca froze for a brief second, an image flashing through her mind. Her own words that morning, dismissive and cutting, thrown at a man who had just been promoted to one of the most powerful international positions in the company. Malik noticed her hesitation. "It is just a ride," he said softly. "Not a reminder." She nodded and stepped inside. The city glowed outside the windows as they drove toward the press center. Neon signs, reflections on glass, the ordered rhythm of crosswalks and pedestrians. Everything seemed sharper, clearer, as if the world looked different because she finally did too. Malik reviewed a briefing document on his tablet while she watched the passing streets. After a long silence, she spoke. "Thank you for not humiliating me on that call." Malik looked up, surprised by the depth in her tone. "There was no purpose in that," he said. "Growth is not born from shame. It is born from recognition." She felt her throat tighten, but she nodded. "You will be an incredible director." He held her gaze for a moment. "I intend to be a fair one." The sedan pulled into the underground entrance of the media center. She stepped out. Beside him, not as someone walking behind, not as someone entitled to lead, but as someone finally ready to learn. The cameras flashed in the distance, waiting for him. And for the first time since sunrise, Rebecca did not fear stepping out of the frame. She understood now that real leadership did not demand the center. It earned its place beside those who had deserved it long before recognition arrived. The press center buzzed like a charged wire, cameras humming, lights warming the air with a quiet intensity that made every movement feel deliberate. Malik stepped into the corridor leading toward the briefing hall, his shoulders steady, his breath even, as though the weight of $1 billion deal and a corporate restructuring sat lightly on him. Rebecca followed one step behind, not out of subservience, not out of fear, but out of a conscious understanding that today was no longer about her image. It was about truth finally coming to the surface. Staff members lined the hallway, whispering, glancing, shifting their attention instinctively toward Malik. Some recognized him from prior negotiations. Others had only heard his name in urgent emails and internal memos. But all of them looked at him with the same expression, respect earned, not granted. As they reached the staging area, an assistant approached with a clipboard. "Director Carter, the international press is ready. They are expecting your statement momentarily." Rebecca absorbed the title as it settled into the air around them. Director, a title that fit him more naturally than anything she had ever worn. Malik nodded and reviewed the final bullet points on the briefing display, though he hardly needed them. He had always known what mattered. Rebecca watched the calm precision of his preparations and realized how many times she had mistaken composure for insignificance. She had never been more wrong in her life. The assistant turned to her. "Ms. Langley, you are invited to join Director Carter on stage, or you may observe from the reserved section." A month ago, she would have chosen the front. Today, she stepped back without hesitation. "I will observe," she said. "This is his moment." Malik glanced at her, the acknowledgement subtle but sincere. The stage doors opened. A sea of cameras faced him, lenses gleaming under white light. Microphones angled forward like a field of listening ears. He walked to the podium with the steady grace of someone who had carried responsibility long before anyone admitted it. The room fell into a hush. He began in English for the global broadcast. Today represents more than a partnership between corporations. It represents a commitment to clarity, integrity, and mutual respect. His voice resonated through the room, calm but unwavering. International work requires more than strategy. It requires humility. It requires listening. And it requires valuing people not for the roles they appear to play, but for the truth of who they are. Rebecca felt the words settle into her bones. Every syllable was a mirror held to her mourning self. The version of her who had judged without knowing, dismissed without seeing, assumed without understanding. Malik continued, "Success is not built by those who raise their voices the loudest. It is built by those who raise the standard." Cameras clicked. Journalists scribbled notes. Even the technicians paused, as if unwilling to miss a single word. He shifted seamlessly into Japanese, honoring Junsei as an equal partner. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, not explosive or chaotic, but steady, deliberate, the applause reserved for those who have earned not praise, but trust. After handshakes and photo flashes, Malik stepped away from the podium. Rebecca met him as he exited the stage. For a moment, they simply stood facing one another, two people who had entered the day on opposite sides of perception and were now walking out of it with a rare and unexpected alignment. "You handled that beautifully," she said softly. "You handled today with honesty," he replied. "Both matter." She breathed out slowly, a release of something she had carried for far too long. "Thank you," she said, "for showing me what leadership should look like." Malik nodded once, then stepped toward the exit, the world waiting for the version of him it should have recognized long ago. And as Rebecca followed him into the evening air, she understood one final truth with absolute clarity. Dignity does not need elevation. It reveals itself the moment someone finally chooses to see it.